everyone, welcome back to another episode of Luncheonette with Laura Diaz. That's me. We're going to get right into an awesome interview. So we're going to start with taking those lunch boxes out and get ready because we have got some information here that I can't wait for you guys to hear. So first of all, I want to ask you please to stay tuned to the end because I have got a list I want you to hear at the end of some people who became very successful that were actually in foster care. But right now I'm going to lead into this interview that I had the privilege and honor of doing of two wonderful young women who grew up in the foster care system, and I can't wait for you to hear their stories. Hi, I'm so excited. We have two special guests with us today, and it's Jennifer and Samantha. Thank you, Jennifer and Samantha, for joining us today. And if you can just share a little bit about yourselves and your story with our viewers out there, I think they're going to be very excited at what you have to say.
Hi, my name's Samantha. I spent about 5 years in the foster care system when I was a young child, was then adopted for 7 years by a family member, and by chance ended up back in the system in Tallahassee when I was 15. When I was in foster care as a young child, it was just a routine of getting on the bus, going to school, coming back on the bus, and that was about all there was to it. I really didn't know what else was going on in the world. Didn't know much about music or movies or even friends or sports or anything like that. And once I was adopted and put into a family situation and had a little bit more freedom, I found all kinds of activities that I was interested in and became a part of and still love very much, which I wish I would have known about when I was younger because I would have been doing it then too. And then when I moved to Tallahassee and ended up getting involved with DCF again, it was a little bit different of a situation because I never went back into a foster home. I was actually the youngest person admitted to the subsidized independent living program, which is an amazing program that I love and is the reason I am where I am today. They assisted me with a couple of bills, but for the most part I worked, I went to school, I lived on my own, and learned a lot of things about life. But I do wish for all of the other foster youth that they have more of a support system because a lot of children aren't ready to go out on their own at that point. I wish that they have more friends, more people to lean on, and that their foster parents aren't scared by the safety regulations that they have to follow, which we're working on, and have the freedom to let their kids be kids.
So when you say we're working on it, Samantha, how are you working on it?
Well, I'm an employee with the Department of Children and Families and have been for almost a year now. This is actually my second position with them. I worked for Children's Legal Services for about 2 years when I was 16. There's a whole bunch of initiatives going on right now to try and recruit better foster parents and more foster parents, and to try and tone down the bureaucracy behind it and allow foster parents to be parents instead of, agents of the department, so to speak. On top of that, I'm involved in a couple of other committees who are trying to improve the behind-the-scenes aspects of being in the dependency system, like going to court, which is where they make all the decisions, and visitation for children who have a goal of reunification, or if they don't, just trying to make sure that wherever their permanent home is, it's a good one, where they'll have all the opportunities that children who are at home have.
So what got you involved in DCF? Like, led you from being in the system, how did you get involved in DCF? I mean, did they come to you and offer you a position, or, were you just passionate about staying involved in the system after your own personal experiences?
Well, as a child, my experiences weren't the greatest, and then when I became involved with the system again when I was older, I had realized how much things had changed, and it really caught my attention. And in the independent living program, I was having trouble finding a job of my own because of my age in a college town where if you're not 18 or older, you're pretty much much out of a job. So I spoke with my attorneys at DCF and my caseworkers, and I asked them if, there was any way that I could work for them and start learning how the department works, how the legal side works, how the caseworkers are doing, and because I've always known I wanted to be a part of it. And I ended up being a secretary for the legal wing for the department, loved it, and did that for a couple of years, and ended up leaving that job for a short time because I was taking a break from school and work at the moment, and met the secretary by happenstance at a Christmas card photo shoot at Florida Baptist Children's Home, and he asked me if I wanted to work again, and I said absolutely.
Well, fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, well, thanks, Samantha. How about you, Jennifer? You want to share a little bit about your story?
Sure. So, let's see. I feel like I've been involved with the foster care system my entire life. I was born to a mom who was schizophrenic, and so basically I went home from the hospital and my mom never did. And I was in and out of foster homes, basically my entire early childhood. And then at the age of 10, ended up on the streets and was homeless for a couple of years, street kid, and then entered foster care for good at the age of 12. And unfortunately, I was never placed into a family home. So immediately, because of my background, by the time I entered care at 12, I already had an arrest record. I had already been out on the street and picked up a lot of behaviors that weren't necessarily viewed as positive by anybody that worked in the system. And so immediately was, labeled as a kid who was a bad kid, and put into all different types of mental health treatment. Interestingly, none of them were actually able to treat anything that was going on. Basically, I was just a lonely kid who was angry and sad about everything that had happened in my life at that point. So my very first placement was a group home placement, and it was a pretty restrictive, high-level group home placement. And from that point on, I moved through lots of other group home placements, shelter placements, juvenile hall, psychiatric hospitals, up until the time I turned 18 and left the system. So when I think about sort of all of the resources that were invested in me during the time that I was in care, I'm actually now, as an adult who's an advocate in the system who thinks about fiscal things a lot, I'm often floored by how much money was probably spent on me, on raising me in care. Probably, in all honesty, looking at it, we're probably talking about tens of thousands of dollars a month in order to, sort of fix something that they weren't internal problems. And I'm a mom myself now. I have 2 children who are young, and sort of every day I'm struck by, if I were to remove myself from the equation with them and instead just sort of put them in a board and care setting and insert services, put them in group therapy and individual therapy and house meetings and behavior modification, and take away a mom out of it, how I think they would turn out. And I just feel like the one thing I needed was a family while I was in care, and that was the one thing that I feel like nobody ever thought of in terms of providing me good care in foster care. So part of what drives my passion for the work that I'm doing right now is knowing how not having a family impacted me. And then at the same time, even though I'm saying that I really wanted a family while I was in foster care, I know that my behavior didn't actually match with that particular statement. I became aware that everybody thought I was too sort of damaged to be in a family environment pretty early on, and I don't think any child, including me, is going to want to pursue something where you feel like you're going to be rejected. And so I pushed, against that sort of trend. It wasn't as if I was saying, please find me a mom. Instead, I was doing just the opposite. I was acting out worse and worse and worse. I was a runner. I was a fighter. I was getting other kids involved in behavior. Actually, when I think back on it now, I think I've actually always been a pretty strong advocate. I just wasn't channeling the advocacy and the energy in the right directions, in a productive direction. Instead, I would do I'd instigate conflicts in the placements I was in. I was always that person who was speaking up for, the other kids that were in the home, but frequently I was not speaking up in a way that actually would get problems resolved, but instead, I was speaking up in a way that would get the police called. So once I got older and actually left the system, I struggled a lot, honestly, because of my experiences leaving care. So obviously a kid's job is to go to school, and the impact of not having a parent involved is that goal slips off, because facilities can't parent kids. So I was put into special education when I was in middle school and moved through programs for severely emotionally disturbed students all through middle school, all through high school, and ended up actually leaving foster care with not only having been in special ed, but I had no high school credits whatsoever. And so it's really difficult when you're 18 and you're trying to go out on your own, and not only do you not have any sort of sense of how the outside world works because you've been really isolated, but I also had no educational background to sort of use as a launching pad. I had never had a regular math class or a regular English class. I didn't have that magic piece of paper that would sort of gain me entryway into a job. I didn't have any of the social connections that would help me, find some position somewhere. So I ended up going to Job Corps right after I left my last group home, and got my GED at Job Corps, got vocational training, and got placed in a job, and then worked for a couple of years, started community college. And it wasn't until I started community college where I, for the first time, actually ended up with a teacher who mentored me. And I think about her a lot because she was not involved in my life 24/7. At most, I interacted with her a few hours every day, but she was so important in terms of how I ended up where I am now, because she believed in me in a way that I didn't see possible at all. I remember in one of my first interactions with her, she told me that she thought I was smart, and I had never heard that word used in connection with me ever before. And so she sort of believed in my potential and then kept making these little progressive baby steps until she'd give me a challenge and then let me do that challenge. And then once I believed that I could actually do that, she'd give me another challenge. And she really built up my confidence in myself. And so actually by the time I was done with my second year of community college, she had me thinking I was going to go to medical school, at which point I realized I'm totally squeamish, I hate blood, I hate needles. But then I thought, well, if I could do anything, because to me, doctors are sort of the highest of the high, and I thought if I thought I could do that, then what is it that I really want to do? And I thought, I don't have any siblings of my own, but I consider everybody who's still in foster care my sibling just by default. And I thought, I think my mission in life is to make things better for other kids who are still in care, and that's when I decided I wanted to go to law school. And so I think about her only because, relatively speaking to what a foster parent does on a day-to-day basis, her interactions with me were so minor. She wasn't caring for me 24/7. She wasn't driving me to school every day. She wasn't helping me with my homework at nighttime, but still she was able to help me see myself in a completely different way than I had ever seen myself before, just by her believing that I had potential and by taking an interest. And so I think, probably I was everybody's, social workers, attorneys, caregivers, I was everyone's nightmare child. Well, was in foster care, but if I had had somebody like her, a foster parent, a mom while I was in care, my experience probably would have been completely different. Just that little bit of parenting that she provided to me that I had never experienced before allowed me to launch my life in a completely different direction. And I'm really grateful to her, but I'm even more grateful when I think about all the people that are dedicating their whole life to countless other kids. I mean, it makes the type of difference that you can't actually quantify.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this question. Let's say I'm a foster parent and I got a phone call from placement, and they were presenting to me, let's say, a young woman who maybe had been in and out of foster care and maybe who had an arrest record. What would you say to me or another foster parent to encourage them to stick this out, to be able to work with this child, maybe see past some of the behaviors and not maybe necessarily look for a mental health diagnosis or something, what do you think they can do to stick with it? Because you said you were fighting foster parents, you were fighting, and even though it's probably what you truly wanted, you were so afraid of that rejection. So what could somebody have done to have maybe made that difference to you?
Well, I mean, one of the things I would say is for a foster parent who's getting a call from placement and they're describing sort of a profile of a young person who's coming in presenting a lot of problems, is to ask additional questions about what context those incidents happened in, because I always felt like what was contained in my case file was so unbelievably one-sided. So yeah, it described that I had been arrested in my group home, but it didn't give the backstory that the reason I was arrested was because it said I had been arrested for assault, but the assault was throwing a glass of water at a staff member who was inappropriately touching young kids that were in the facility. And so as a foster parent, you hear sort of a tip of the iceberg, but you don't hear a lot of the other information that actually would make you understand that not only is this child not as damaged or flawed as they sound initially, but actually they're really a sane person in an insane environment. And I actually think nobody understands that better than foster parents understand that. If foster parents didn't fear, the consequences if they threw a glass of water occasionally, at an uncooperative or unreceptive social worker or attorney or judge, I'm sure it would happen much more frequently. So foster parents understand how difficult the system is and, all of the challenges better than anybody. I mean, if there's anybody who really gets sort of how challenging it is to structure your family life, your home life, to raise children in a system that is not set up around the needs of children. We're moving there, but really at this point, it's still really our systems are designed around the needs and the conveniences of adults. Foster parents get it, and so I think putting on sort of that lens and that perspective when you're hearing about the experience of a child and hearing that they're depressed and they have attachment problems, but then asking the question, well, what have their experiences been like being able to connect or maintain their connections with adults up to this point? How frequently do they get to be with siblings? That's sort of from their perspective. I would ask for more information and then try to imagine themselves in that situation. And my experience has been, and of course I'm biased because I've always been feisty and I like feisty people, but my experience has been almost universally that when I meet other young people who were very, very difficult while they were in foster care, that those difficulties end up really being assets to them.
Strengths for something else, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
And when I started law school, actually, I remember they said, just to summarize, they say what you're going to learn in law school, you're going to learn how to manipulate people, you're going to learn how to argue, you're going to learn how to sort of do whatever needs to be done in order to get a particular outcome. And I thought, well, I could probably teach law school then because I became really good at that as a teenager.
Manipulation, right?
Absolutely, because that's what you have to do to survive. Not because it's something you enjoy doing, but that's just the environment that you're in. And many, many young people, I think, if we just looked at the things that we described as their deficiencies in a different strength-based light, we would find they're actually amazing. So I guess that's one thing. In terms of talking to young, I think the other side of your question is what could somebody have done to convince me to want to be part of a family? And I would say there's nothing anybody could have actually said to me that would have convinced me that I would have been safe in a family. They would have had to show me. And I think by the time I was probably 13 or 14, I would have needed progressive opportunities to learn to trust adults again. By that point in time, I had had so many negative experiences with adults violating, basically everything that you can violate with a child. that I would have need to sort of have the chance to regain that trust in adults and to think that being a part of a family was something that I could do. So I would say for kids that are resistant, looking at opportunities to have them spend holidays with a family where it doesn't feel threatening. I mean, if you had told me I would have gotten to get out of my group home for 24 hours, I would have jumped at it. If you had said, wouldn't you like to be a part of a family and to go spend Thanksgiving with them, so that you can sort of move towards that, I would have been like, absolutely not. No family's going to want me. But a free pass out of the group home, yes. So I think it's all about how you frame, and then you figure out, I'm a people person. I've always liked being around people. So I think you figure out just sort of by default, this is a place I could be.
Okay, well, that's awesome. Just one quick last question for you guys, if you can share just in a parting comment. If you were going to speak to a teen, if we had some teens out there watching, that little bit of encouragement that you discussed, from your teacher, what's the thing that you would like them to know that's going to give them the hope and the knowledge that they can become successful even in spite of the circumstances that they're in right now? What would you tell them?
I would tell them to use their resources, to believe in themselves, and to go for it. And to, despite all of the things that have happened to them that might not be so positive, that there's so much more to life than everything that's behind you. And if you just keep on going and you keep on trying and you stay strong and strong-minded most of all, that you're going to take those little steps forward, and they might seem small and unimportant, and it might seem like it's going to take forever to get to where you want to be, but it's going to happen, and there's plenty of people who are going to be willing to support you despite all the people who wanted to watch you fail.
Mm-hmm. Very good. How about you, Jennifer?
If I had the opportunity to talk to youth, I think I would tell them that they should think of every negative thing that anybody has ever said about them, and they should reframe it in a positive way, and those are going to be the assets and the qualities that are actually going to help them be successful in life. So if people have told them, that they're, overly angry and aggressive, they should think about it and, think about aggressive in a positive sense, that they'll probably be amazing at running a corporation or aggressively, raising money for an organization or a cause that they believe in. If people have told them that they're going to be manipulative, they know they can be an agent of change, that they'll be able to influence, the system or influence other individuals to do what is right. If people have told them that they are depressed and overly emotional, then they know in their heart they're carrying around a sensitivity that will help them be an amazing child care provider or a teacher or a veterinarian. But basically, just to remember that each one of us we're all individuals, and and the qualities that we have are what make us unique. And that I think it's just really important to remember that nobody can actually accurately describe you while you're in a system. And if you make it to the point where you're thinking about your life after the system, you've been able to overcome things that other people would find unimaginable. And there's nothing that's going to be too difficult for you after this point. And so I think if we think about what we've accomplished and what we've been able to overcome, we'll find out that there's sort of nothing in life you can't tackle.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. And I have a special thank you parting gift. Here it is, Luncheonette with Laura Diaz t-shirt. And look, a reminder, because you're going to be watching to see when we air this live broadcast, Fridays at 12:30. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Guys, I just have to share with you my feelings about this interview, because as foster parents, we have what I would like to say is an honor and privilege to touch the lives of young people. And it's particularly inspiring to hear their messages, even though theirs weren't particularly the best experiences in foster care, but it is just so inspiring to see that they've come around and become such huge success stories. And it makes me feel like I can be part of that difference in a child's life, and to know that eventually down the road we can listen to success stories of our foster children is why we do what we do. So so I hope that you saw that in them, and it was truly inspiring to me. So I hope in the future that we're going to be able to do some more interviews with people who have been in the system and how it's changed their lives and how they've been able to come through it and become success stories themselves. So, got a few updates and announcements for you, so I'm going to roll right into that. First of all, we have just posted our video training. It's the suicide prevention training for foster parents, so take a look at that. I think it's a great tool for you. We need to definitely become more aware of some of the signs that children might be giving us for suicide. We all know that it's a horrible situation, and it's one that we need to really stay on top of. Okay, a second one is that we are going to be heading into the 2012 Child Protection Summit, which is going to be called Realizing Change. So stay tuned here, and we're going to post some information also on our website at www.qpiflorida.com. We'll keep you posted on what's going on for the summit and how you can get involved in that. We're hoping that we're going to have a huge turnout. There's going to be awesome workshops and great plenaries, and we're going to get lots of great information that we're going to be able to bring back to you as well. So I promised you early on that I was going to give you a list, and you know I like to Google these lists for you, and I have found a whole list of people who were in foster care or adopted. They're famous politicians, athletes, entertainers, and scholars. So I'm going to read them. I'm going to read them pretty quickly, but we'll post some as well. Allison Anders, Alonzo Mourning, Anthony Cos de Cosmo, Ben Nighthorse Campbell, Billy Mills, Bruce Oldfield, Carl Hancock Rooks, Charlotte Ayana, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your names if you happen to be watching this, successful people, Cher, Dan O'Brien, Daryl DMC McDaniels, Dante Culpepper, Dave Peltzer, we all know him from his books, Dr. Wayne Dyer, Eddie Murphy, Eric LaSalle, Isai Morales, Ice-T, not the drink, the person, James Dean, John Lennon, Malcolm X, Michael Orr, Marilyn Monroe, Ruth Westheimer, Steve Jobs, Tom Monahan, Tommy Davidson, Victoria Rowell, and Willie Nelson. So I don't know if you're surprised that a few of those are on there, but very interesting stories that each one of them have, and you might want to check that out. But it is nice to hear of all these successful people who grew up in foster care. And remember, those children in your house, you could be making the difference for them too. So keep doing what you're doing. And don't forget, if we can ever help you with some of your training needs, go to our website and request training. We're here to help you at QPI Florida. So every Friday, we're going to air this episodes. And I just want to remind you one more time that if you can't watch it at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that they're going to be posted under past episodes. Click them, watch them anytime, and share the information with your friends and fellow foster parents. And with that, I'll say see you next week. Thanks.